Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast with Stu Turley. My name's Stu Turley, President of the Sandstone Group. Last time I checked, and I also have David Blackmon here. He is co-hosting this thing here with the Energy Impacts with David Blackmon. How are you today, David?
Oh, I'm just peachy, man. It's a great day to be an American.
I'll tell you what, I got all fired up after seeing President Trump and them Democrats sit on their hands. You can't beat that kind of entertainment.
It was pretty wild.
All right, coming around the corner, we have Mark Stansbury. He is one of my oil and gas heroes and legends. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for stopping by the podcast today.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks to you, Dave, and Doug as well. Yes.
And we have Doug Sandridge. I absolutely love Doug Sandridge. He is not only an oil executive, he's a landman, and he's also all fired up about nuclear energy. He is an advocate for nuclear. How are you today?
Never better.
Well, I think Mark just lost his camera. So
we lost Mark.
Yep, but we're still going to keep rolling on in here. And David, I'm going to ask you, you've seen the whole series of Landman.
Every minute. Love it.
What's your thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I put a post up about it after the second episode when he went on that incredible rant with the young lady lawyer about why the oil industry is important. I made a post on LinkedIn about it, and that post got 800,000 views. Wow. 800,000. Which tells you how popular the show is, not how popular I am. This is it's an extraordinary bit of television that would never be allowed by standard Hollywood to be produced. It could only be done by Taylor Sheridan in today's universe, in a way that would be, reach such extraordinary popularity. And because it portrays the oil industry in a somewhat sympathetic light, a somewhat realistic light, and then in an overly dramatized light, with all the fatal incidents and all this stuff that happens out seemingly every week to this poor independent producer out in the Permian Basin. The truth is it's an incredibly safe industry these days, although there's a lot of risk working out there in the oil field. But I think the first question I'd like to pose to Mark and hopefully, Doug, and hopefully Mark comes back here soon, is this really a show about a landman? Doug, you're a landman. What do you think?
Well, thanks for having me. And I love the show as well. It's very entertaining. I'm a big Taylor Sheridan fan, and so it was a must-see for me regardless. The reality is it does portray the oil business in many ways, the way it really is. Midland is pretty much the way it's shown in the TV show.
Yeah.
And a lot of the cultural issues and things are very much like real life. The landman part of it, maybe a little bit less. I think, they kind of shown Billy Bob Thornton, basically shown him as being a landman, and he's not really what you would typically think of as a landman. Now, if you work for a small company in the oil business, there are a lot of landmen who do similar jobs to him. But a typical landman, if you're looking for a definition, that he does a far broader scope of work than just what a typical landman is. And to be honest, the guy, his son, at the end of the show, I think the last episode, when he's out buying leases and talking to landowners on the top of his pickup truck hood, that's more like what we would think of a typical landman. So I think the show's great and it's very entertaining. But the depiction of Billy Bob as a landman is probably not that accurate.
Yeah, my favorite line about the Billy Bob character is he's not a landman. He's more of a field production or area production superintendent.
Exactly.
But Landman is a whole lot better title for a TV show than Field Production Superintendent. So you got to go with what you got, right?
You bet.
What do you think? What do you think Landman produces, gives us any sort of a realistic view of what really happens in the oil patch in the Permian Basin?
Is that my question?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry about
We
that.
can
We're
see
having
it again.
some technology problems on our end, just for a second there. But, it really overall is, drama mixed with what Doug and you both have spoken about. You have to have some drama to catch the audience. At the same time, I did call Rebecca Ponton, who is the author of in Landman magazine, which has about 30 pages of material there about Landman, the TV show. It wound up that when visiting with her, what they had done through Taylor and others, they had a roughneck school. So a lot of those folks actually spent 5 days or so studying about the lingo and everything involved when it comes to in 5 days is not enough by any means, but at least almost 5 full days of asking questions. And I asked Rebecca, and I've written articles with Rebecca. She's a great writer. She's editor of Energy's Media Magazine. And she spoke about how that they related to the energy business, especially the oil and gas side of it, to the point that they're bought in that, to think about all the products that come from oil and gas. That was a big deal. So I would say they're making it as real as possible with the drama involved. I agree with Doug. From what I heard a minute ago, he said, I remember being a landman, 48 years ago, and things haven't changed that much when it comes to titles. The workload is still there, from checking title, buying leases but to be a company man at a location is usually not the landman. But it gives a good view.
Well, I think so. Go ahead, Stu. Go ahead, Stu.
I got one of the things here that I'm going to just go. I've got this clip here. It's a 120-year infrastructure. And while I was getting the video clips for this, I thought it was very well said. It's really telling that there is a narrative out there that Landman is fixing. And I'm very pleased to see it.
Our whole lives depend on it. And hell, it's in everything. That road we came in on, the wheels on every car ever made, including yours, it's in tennis rackets and lipstick and refrigerators and antihistamines, pretty much anything plastic, your cell phone case, artificial heart valves, any kind of clothing that's not made with animal or plant fibers, soap and hand lotion, garbage bags, fishing boats, you name it. Every thing. And you know what the kicker is? We're going to run out of it before we find its replacement.
It's the thing that's going to kill us all. As a species.
No, the thing that's going to kill us all is running out before we find an alternative. Getting oil out of the ground is the most dangerous job in the world. We don't do it because we like it. We do it because we run out of options. And you're out here trying to find something to blame for the danger besides your boss. There ain't nobody to blame but the demand that we keep pumping it.
Now, I absolutely love that. That was absolutely way cool. Now, was that the scene where she froze near a rattlesnake?
No, that's a different scene. That was in, I think, the 4th episode where she almost got bit by the rattlesnake. That's the scene I posted on LinkedIn. I also wrote a Forbes story about it, and that Forbes story had more traffic than any story I'd written in a year. So, I mean, that scene right there, I think, really struck a nerve, not just with people in the industry, but people outside of the industry in our society who have, always kind of wondered what oil is used for, but have never really had it explained that way on national television because of the inherent bias in the media that doesn't want you to know all that stuff. I wonder what you think, Doug. Do you think, am I overstating the impact of that particular scene, do you think?
Not at all. And I love the scene as well because I do a lot of lecturing and teaching. I try and do a lot of lecturing and teaching to people who don't necessarily, that are not in our industry. I'm trying to provide a broader education to a broader group of people.
Yeah.
And almost always when I start talking about energy and I start talking about petroleum, I talk about why is energy important. And energy is not an industry, it is the industry that basically enables all other industries. And then when we talk about fossil fuels and more specifically oil and gas, most people think about oil and gas as being something we put in our car. We lube the car, we put gasoline in the car, and the reality is less than half of every barrel that we use is used for gasoline.
Yeah.
The other 55% of every barrel that's used every day, all 10 million barrels or 100 million barrels worldwide, more than half of that is used for 6,000 other things that people don't know. And I think most people are shocked when they find out that if without oil, you don't have asphalt, you don't have wind turbine blades, you don't have all the other things. So for whenever I start teaching, I give that same speech that Billy Bob gave to my students.
Just without the profanity, right?
Without the profanity. Now, I never get 800,000 views on any of this stuff like you, but yes, it's spot on. And there's some things in the show where there's a little bit of hyperbole and a little bit of exaggeration, but that rant right there was spot on.
Yeah. Mark, I want to ask you, I mean, one of the concerns that I get from time to time watching the show is, like I mentioned earlier, there have been, I think, 7 people now killed out there in the oil patch,
Right.
either in accidents or or by Billy Bob Thornton bringing in the National Guard to shoot drug traffickers. Do you have concerns? I mean, and Doug, you too. I mean, all of y'all really. I mean, we're all kind of affiliated with the business one way or another. Do you think the show is harming the image of the industry by portraying it in such a way? Because, I mean, we probably haven't had that many fatalities in the Permian Basin in 10 years, okay?
No,
much less
that's right.
2 weeks, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, do you have concerns about the way that's being portrayed?
David, yes, I was at one company, a public company. I was head of the environmental regulation committee, and we had around 300 employees out in the field, and they would have a mandatory from our board to make sure we had weekly meetings on safety. And out of those 300 or so, and there'll be an average workers for about 7 years I was on the board. We had some, accidents. No one died from working on location. So I would say yes, again, a dramatic part of it. It might be good if they would mention that. I did talk to Rebecca about that in her writing. She said they feel like it's a safe industry, and at the same time and I'm saying Billy Bob and the actors that she interviewed were very, very supportive of the industry. They knew that it was one thing they said, it's 24/7. You can't you have to keep things moving. And they were very enlightened by the industry. So I think the safety side is something they're aware of. I don't know that the audience is going to capture it like they should. And it does concern me.
You nailed that, Mark. I'll tell you, with my experience on the pads, when we were at Nape, Doug and I were at Nape a couple weeks ago. Years ago, I met a gentleman, and on a handshake, you get 1,800 pads. That's the way Nape went. But that's not how the oil field works. Oil field does not work like this.
Stop that ambulance. No, start the ambulance.
You don't want to go to the hospital with that?
No, I want a cigarette and a Dr. Pepper. It's a cooler there.
That is not the oil field.
No, that's not the oil field.
I will say,
So when you sit back and go, when we were doing all these pads for intelligent well pads and all those things, one of my guys stepped out of his truck, then put his hard hat on, and I got thrown off of a BHP well site because that's not what safety men do. They go. They are very, very strict, and for a good reason.
Well, I will say that about 45 years ago or so, I was on a location similar like Billy Bob, but visiting as a landman. And a gentleman had an accident, and two of his fingers were removed, and he went that day and got fixed up that evening. He came back. He was working. Now, that's 45 years ago. That's not the way it is today by any means. And I think to think of the past and how environmental issues were in these, Giant, the movie Giant and things like that, which happens to be Billy Bob's one of his favorite films. You can't look back at movies like that and say that's today. It's not.
Clearly, this is a TV show, and so there's got to be a lot of violence and sex and skin and language to make it fun for everybody to watch, but it is not the reality. I'm kind of like Mark. I think when I look at this show, that reminds me of things 40, 50 years ago. Right. And I was roughnecking when I was in college, and these types of things were much more common then. Safety now is so paramount. I used to know so many people who had lost fingers and thumbs and toes, and it was actually, when I was roughnecking, it was very unusual for someone like me to be working and have all of my digits. That was the exception rather than
still
the rule.
have all your digits, yeah.
But now it's completely the opposite. It's very, very uncommon to see anyone losing a finger, and safety is so paramount in our industry now. And it used to be drilling companies would assume you're going to have a certain number of accidents, a certain number of injuries, even a certain number of deaths per year, and that's just what was expected. Now, all the companies, the drilling companies and the oil companies themselves, have a zero tolerance. They have failed if they don't have an accident-free year. So it is not an accurate depiction. I've never seen a pumping unit on fire, but you got to blow something up like blowing up a car to make people watch it. So.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about
every time I talk to Doug Sandridge, I find
like that much. You don't see the blowouts like we saw in the past.
Oh my
back
God.
when I was. Excuse me, Dave.
No, you're right. I mean, that's exactly right. I was just going to say, every time I talk to Doug Sandridge, I find out he and I have more in common. I also worked out in the oil patch 2 summers when I was in college on a pipeline and field construction crew. I got electrocuted. I got electrocuted one day around 11 o'clock in the morning. And if that happened to anyone now, you'd be immediately rushed to the emergency room. I got up, worked the rest of the day, went out, drank beer that night, woke up the next morning and had no memory of any of that. Goodness. And went to work that day too. So, I mean, now you'd be, not only go to the emergency room, you'd probably be out on paid leave for a week or two.
Well, David, I got a funny story. Back in the old days, and I'm sure it's the same now, when you work on a drilling rig, you generally wear these very loose fit white gloves, cotton gloves. And the reason they're lightweight is because you want them to tear away if your fingers get caught in a chain or a motor or something, so that it won't suck your hand and your arm into it. So you wear these very flimsy gloves, and usually wear one pair a day and then throw them away, or maybe even wear a pair in the morning, throw them away, and wear another pair in the afternoon. So if you stop for lunch, so if you were in the old days, if you had these cotton gloves and you were missing your forefinger and your pinky, you would push the glove in so that it's not flopping around. You don't want the fingers that you're missing flopping around. So everyone pushes in the gloves for the digits they're missing. Well, you take a break for lunch or for something, and then after lunch, you got all these gloves laying around, and what you do is you say, oh, missing forefinger and ring finger, that must be Stu Turley's glove. And then you pick up another set and say, oh, missing 3 fingers and a thumb on the right hand, that must be David Blackmon's. And so I was always very gratified to know that when they picked up the gloves that had all 5 fingers, pointing out that, oh, those must be Sandridge's gloves because he's still got all of his digits. But that's how pervasive it was at the time. So just an example.
I thought that they did a staffing, and Mark, is your experience in producing movies and things, I thought the cast was phenomenal. Let me play this one clip with the daughter.
Please.
You mean wells? Too shallow.
How deep do they need to be?
Dale?
Between 10 and 13,000 feet, but you got to drill at an angle and then you got to frack it.
Frack it.
You shoot a shit ton of salt water down hole, and you squeeze all that oil out of the fractures, then you pump it up, separate the water.
Yeah, isn't this the technology that's causing earthquakes in Oklahoma?
There were earthquakes in Oklahoma before fracking, ma'am.
You understand, I don't think anyone should be doing this, all right? I think it should be illegal.
Well, then you should have run for Congress instead of getting a job with an oil company.
I have a very hard time advocating for something I believe is wrong.
Says the lawyer. Good and bad don't factor into this, Rebecca. Our great-grandparents built a world that runs on this shit right here. Until it starts running on something else, we got to feed it, or the world stops. There is an alternative. You can throw your phone away and trade that Mercedes in for a bicycle or a horse and start hunting for your own food and living in a tent. But you'll be the only one, and it won't make a damn bit of difference.
My favorite episode of the whole thing so far. The acting is tremendous, and I think it goes back to being studied. Going to the Roughneck School, talking out. They went out to locations, but also went and visited some of the local lounges and bars and so forth, and interacted with people. These actors really took it seriously, and my partner Gray Fredrickson, he produced the Godfather movies and was really a great partner. He passed away a few years ago. He had Billy Bob Thornton in a movie back in the year 2000, and he said he was probably one of the most studied actors. He sometimes comes across sometimes a little bit on the crazy side, but he said he was probably the most serious actor of all and really took it very seriously in making the portrayal look real. And he's a great actor, no question. But the team I was impressed with everyone.
What I like about that clip is he's telling the truth, and these are truths that a lot of people don't want to hear. I mean, he's not exaggerating. He's just stating things that a lot of people don't want to hear because everyone believes that we are in this so-called energy transition. And Stu was at a class that I taught at University of Oklahoma in January, and I asked the class at the beginning, how many people here think that we're in an energy transition? And of course, everyone in the class raised their hand. And then I said, what is an energy transition? And we had a few-minute discussion, and people raised their hand and bantered back and forth. But basically, at the end of it, they said they agreed on the generalized term is, we think of an energy transition as we're transitioning from fossil fuels, oil and gas and coal, to renewables. I mean, everyone has their own definition, but that's the pretty recognized definition in the public commentary. So I did my presentation, and then at the end of my presentation, I said, does anyone know that last year we used more crude oil in the world than any single year in history? Does anyone in the class realize we used more natural gas last year in the world than any year in history, ever? Does anyone in the class realize that we used more coal last year worldwide than any year in history? And then I said, now how many of you think that we're in an energy transition? Not one person raised their hand.
That's great.
We're in a period of energy addition.
Yes, and innovation, yes.
So the transition, it's really the definition of transition. We are in an energy transition. It's just not the one people think we're in. We're in a transition from lots of energy to lots more energy.
And think about it. You didn't even tell them we used more wood last year for energy than in any year in history, too. I mean, we haven't even managed to complete the transition from wood to coal, which started 600 years ago, right? So
good one.
It's going to be a while.
That's correct.
I'll remember that, David.
So you mentioned a little while ago, what is this show really about? I've got my own theory, but we're going into a second season here, I think late this year or early next year. Who do you think is really going to end up being the central character in this show, the title Landman? Is it going to still be Billy Bob Thornton, or is it going to be his wife and daughter at the elder care center, or is it going to be Billy Bob Thornton's son and his future wife? What do y'all think?
I haven't seen all the episodes, so it's a tough question. That's getting out of the answer, isn't it? But I feel like Billy Bob will still be a standout, no matter what situation. Having the center, you feel like the Godfather, but he may fade away, but you think of Marlon Brando still, or you think of Al Pacino.
Right.
So Billy Bob will have to, if he exits ever, he'll be still the center point. Landman is like the Godfather in that sense, that he will carry it forward. So the message is very important because what Billy Bob says is essential to our future too. And he's doing that so far in a pleasing way. I mean, when you think about what we have gone through as a country, and to say that oil and gas still has a play in a big way, and that's really what Billy Bob's talking about. You can't do without it right now, and you probably won't do away with it for a long time, is a message you and I, all four of us, have tried to get across for years in our campaigns of getting energy education in the forefront. And here you have a TV show, and closest to, I think, being to mid, as far as Texas, the Permian Basin. Before all this was Austin, Texas, where Billy Bob would perform and visit. So this is a great message. Hope it keeps up. There's going to be a lot of drama and changes along the way, but in the long run, he's our messenger, like the Godfather was for that film, Landman, Billy Bob.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he's doing a great job.
He is.
No
Yeah,
question.
I think Landman it's a soap opera like Yellowstone. Yellowstone is not about ranching. Yellowstone is a soap opera that takes place on a ranch. It's about people. It's about people. And this is a soap opera about the oil business, and it's not. A lot of things aren't particularly realistic, but because it's a soap opera and it's not a docuseries, since it's a soap opera, Billy Bob will remain the central character. But I love his son's character, and he is the only real landman in the show.
Yeah,
so I'm hoping that he will continue to show up as a big part of the show, and he has a certain charm about him too. I've never seen that actor before, but
I haven't either. It's the first thing I've ever seen him in. Yeah.
So,
It's interesting you say that because Rebecca Houghton, again, the author of the Energy Media's magazine article, which again is about 30 pages. So she mentioned that as the landman, he was she brought up, she said, I was a landman. That's how I got started. And he loved that because he hadn't got to talk to that many landmen. He had some, but not to that point. So I thought it was really interesting how he took on the character by really listening to her, and she gave some feedback, which was really good feedback.
And as this applies to real world deals, since that's probably what I do for my day job sometimes, is that I thought this clip was fairly interesting.
The employee who is convinced I want him fired would like to meet alone. Pick the dirt road out in the oil fields where there's no witnesses or cell service. That sounds like a great fucking idea.
I think the oil field is exactly where we ought to meet.
And why is that?
Because you need to renegotiate a $170 million farm out lease, and I think you need at least a basic understanding of what you're renegotiating.
Since you know so much, why don't you renegotiate it?
2 reasons, honey. 1, it's not my fucking job, it's yours. And 2, Monty's not the president anymore. I am.
Why not just fire me and use Nate?
Because Nate is a very good lawyer, and nothing will fuck up a great deal like a good lawyer. I need a fucking closer. I need a killer, somebody they don't see coming, and you're certainly that.
Send me a pin. And I would like to point out I am licensed to carry concealed in this state.
I'd like to point out, Rebecca, that you don't need a license to carry concealed in this state. It's why we all wave at each other when we're driving, because everybody's fucking armed. Well, we need...
I thought that was pretty funny. But You know, when you sit back and you talk about deals and you talk about a closer and things, I thought they were bringing up some very valid points, and that's why everybody in Oklahoma and Texas waves at each other, because you like to see that they had their hands are free. I mean, it's part of the culture.
I think the lady that plays the lawyer does a great job too.
Yes.
I don't know, I've never seen her in anything either. She's terrific, and the character is very, very realistic to me. When I was for Burlington Resources, which was a big independent years ago, I headed up the litigation support function there for a few years, and we had one external lawyer who was just like that, very young, didn't know anything about the industry, but was just an absolute killer of a lawyer. And she was the one you wanted to have in your corner in a big brawl. So just so much of this show reminds me of my own experiences in the industry. And I just, so back to my theory is about who the show's about. I think y'all really both talked about it. I think it's about the son at the end of the day. He's the landman in the title, in addition just to it being a much catchier title for a show than field superintendent. So and I've lost my train of thought. I had another question I was going to ask, and now I've forgotten what it was because my phone rang a minute ago. So the wife and daughter, that's the other thing. I wonder if y'all find them entertaining or annoying. I find them to be both, but I mean, I just wonder if they're just a distraction to what the story should be about, or is that just essential to making an entertaining television show, right? Just like they've done in Yellowstone.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think not only entertaining, but to show that the workforce comes from all walks of life. I mean, to me, it's like, it's not just a certain prototype. I mean, Landman, for example. I mean, my goodness, Rebecca, again, I've talked about her. She was, a woman in the land as a landman, and back when it wasn't that many, there weren't that many land women involved that way, and right. She stood out, but all walks of life. She said, I'd meet somebody and they'd come in, they'd been out all night, and then I was very disciplined. And you have all walks of life in regard to the workforce, and this workforce is so big and so important that you're going to meet all kinds. But we all work together. We're united together. And I think it does show that to a certain degree. I appreciate that message they're trying to get across for us.
Yeah, I think they do a good job of showing that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think the mother and the daughter are like nobody I know. I'm sure somebody's married to a woman like that and has a daughter. My wife and daughter are nothing like that. So
exactly. No, mine either. Yeah.
I'm
glad too. I'm really glad about that.
I think it's a lot of skin. That's part of the soap opera, and it's different people are watching for different reasons, and some people are watching to watch the daughter. So, I mean, the reality is that's not a very realistic portrayal, but it's just part of what you have to do to have a Taylor Sheridan blockbuster TV show. So
this whole discussion, I'm really gratified by it, and I want to thank Stu for putting the panel together, because this is really a great panel. Because I've watched other podcasts in the industry who have been very upset by this show and spent their whole hour talking about how Billy Bob's not really a landman and completely missed the point of the whole thing. Right. So I'm really gratified by the progress of this discussion here.
Yeah, I've never been more proud to be a landman. Everywhere I go, I'm a celebrity now. My wife originally said she wasn't going to watch the show because she wasn't a big fan of Taylor Sheridan. She didn't ever get into Yellowstone or any of his other shows. And so she said, you just watch that on your own time. And then she came home a couple of weeks later and said, I think I'm going to watch the show with you. And she didn't exactly say this, but what I think happened is everybody's talking about this show. Yeah. I mean, she goes to lunch with her friends, and her friends are talking about it, and she's the only one who's not doesn't know what's going on in episode 3. And of course, for most of her friends, the only person that they know that's a landman is her husband. So they're asking her questions and she can't answer the questions. So I think she kind of eventually decided, well, I better watch the show so I can stand around the water cooler and answer questions about it because my husband's a landman.
It's funny you say that because I was at a reception not too long ago, about a week or so ago. And the conversation, they knew I was involved in energy business. So several people started coming towards me. I thought I was in trouble. But it wound up being entertaining in the sense that they're not in the energy business. And they were asking all kinds of questions. Before the show, they could care less. And to come up to me now and say, is this real? Is this not real? What is the Landman? What is, what's Billy Bob Thornton's really, what is he really doing? What's his title? I mean, there's so many things that I wish, we'd have had, the four of us could have had when it comes to promoting energy education. But we have that opportunity a lot now because it's a conversation piece. And so we can talk about at least like the products that come from oil and gas alone is huge. I mean, I've been trying I have a campaign that was called America Needs America's Energy. We had back in 2010, 11, 12, was pretty active back in that time frame. And we were trying to get the message out that, our products, 6,000 plus, whatever it might be, in the oil and gas side. And of course, I mentioned to one of my friends not too long ago, and he'd visited a hospital, actually as a patient. He looked around the room and saw that all these plastics were saving his life. Well, that makes a difference. So this conversation is big, and I love visiting with you guys because it's another part of this is just getting the message out. Let's keep talking. Again, we've got an opportunity that we last hopefully longer. Yeah.
We only have a few more minutes here, but Mark, how do people reach you? Because you're an author and you have your book. I have your book over here. You've been a guest on my podcast a few times, and I absolutely love following all your work and your
thank you.
Everything out there. So you are a true resource out there. And how do people get a hold of you?
Yes, go to markstansbury.com. That's MarkStansbury.com.
And Doug Sandridge, you've got an outstanding Substack out there. I love Energy Remediations. I can't say it because I went to Oklahoma State. But when you were presenting to OU, that was a highlight for me because those kids are phenomenal. And your presentation was out of the park, and the staff is working on it because it's a good enough presentation. We want it to show other folks and get it out there. So thank you for what you're doing, especially as an advocate for energy. And give us a shout out. Tell us what your Substack is and your nuclear organization.
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me is probably through LinkedIn. Just find me on LinkedIn, but my email is doug@fulcrumef.com. That's FULCRUMEF.com. That's my email address. My Substack is Energy Ruminations, or Douglas C. Sandridge Substack. So it's called Energy Ruminations. And then I'm also the executive director for Oil and Gas Executives for Nuclear Energy. And you can go to Execs for Nuclear website, execsfornuclear.com website. So that's how you can get a hold of me.
All right. And David, as always, it's great to see you. Everybody can find you on blackmon.substack.com. I steal all your articles. In fact, you can see right here on my screen, there's yours right there on energynewsbeat.co.
Come in. Can I get a royalty?
Absolutely. You get the
mailbox
podcast. It's included.
I love it.
With that, everybody, thank you all very much. Fantastic comments, and we appreciate everybody on today's podcast. We'll see you guys soon.
Can't wait for
everybody.
season 2. Let's go.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Stu, Doug.
Good to meet you.